Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 11 of Making the Shift.
That's right. We have made it to episode 11.
You say that every episode.
And I was thinking about this, though. I was like, you know what? There's usually things that come with a significance to a number, But then I was thinking about 11, and there's not really much that comes in groups of 11. But then I thought about something recently that did come in a group of 11. Donuts, when I bring them home, they come back with 11 of them.
Sometimes 10.
Sometimes 10.
9.
Well, you know it. We have a new sound. I hope that the sound comes through clear tonight. We are speaking through a better quality microphone, I think. So I wanted to test it out with you guys.
From the tech dude.
So let's give it a test for the listeners out there.
So we...
I'm doing a test.
Oh, okay.
I'm doing a test. Here we go.
Your thing.
This is American Idol with your host, Ryan Seacrest here. No, okay. I've always wanted to do that.
That was just your excuse to do it.
That was my excuse. I got to do it.
We are still getting back into the swing of things. If you can't tell, we took a long weekend, went up north to my hometown, and my little brother got married. And all of me and my two brothers, 3 of us siblings, were all engaged at the same time.
That is fantastic. It was my first time up to visit her side of the family too. And it was
not the
family, but the town where Jesse grew up in. And
Yes.
It was much different than the town I grew up in. So it's kind of a nice feeling to get out of town to see everything that her hometown involved.
I know, it's funny because I grew up in Carmel, which is known to be a beach town. So it has that beachy kind of preppy feel in a lot of places, but then it also, like 10 minutes away in Carmel Valley, it's really ranchy. And we went to the hay and feed store, and Baby Jack played in the hay, and we listened to live music. With the stage was a pickup truck.
And it was awesome, just all around. Everybody had a blast.
Yeah, we did a lot of fun stuff.
We don't get to do that kind of stuff all too often. When you have 3 children, things can be a little bit tough, but we were able to get out there and just really soak it up. The wedding went fantastic for her brother.
And you officiated the wedding.
I was the acting ordained minister.
Fun fact, you guys may not know that about him.
Yeah, so it's behind my credentials. When I write my reports, it says Chris Winger, CCC-SLP-ordained minister.
/DJ/MC/OM.
All of it.
So many special things.
Awesome stuff.
So today we are talking all about what not to do when you see problem behaviors. This is a conversation we have probably every single week. And it's such a great topic because I think there are just so many misperceptions out there about what to do when you see challenging behaviors. And I think the other thing is that they directly affect us. So
yeah, absolutely.
How could we not care?
And, working in the schools, we see this happen all the time, right? When we're working within our field, we see certain challenging behaviors arise, and we see how they're handled and what the outcomes are of those things. And we really wanted to dive into that for this episode.
Yeah. And I would say we use the term challenging behaviors lightly. I always say behaviors in quotes because I think behaviors are often mislabeled as something that's done intentionally, when a lot of the times that's not the case, which is what we wanted to talk about today. So I learned a really great analogy. It was in the book Beyond Behaviors by Mona De La Hook. And she talks about behaviors as an iceberg. And when you think of the tip of the iceberg, it's this tiny part of the iceberg. That's all we can see. So that represents the behavior. And then there's this mass under the water of the rest of the iceberg. And that represents, why it's all happening. And so often when we see behaviors, the first question we have is, how can we get rid of it? When the question we should be asking is, what is this behavior telling us about the child?
Right. We're reframing the question. because we mentioned back in one of our earlier episodes, the questions are going to lead to the quality of our answers. And so the question is reframed from how can we, instead of saying, how can we get this child to participate, or how can we get this child to stop biting or hitting or screaming or saying bad words, we reframe it to, why is this child exhibiting this behavior? Yeah. And how can we address it in that regard?
And there are so many things that could be factoring into that behavior. You know, it's not always as simple as one answer. Like we said, the bottom of the iceberg can have so many different elements. And you think about kids, you think about, did they get enough sleep? Did they eat well today? Are they having any stomach issues? Do they have any health issues? How's their emotional regulation? Are they in distress? Do they have anxiety? Do they have sensory differences? All of these things can factor into that surface level behavior that we see. So I think that where we got into this conversation was he was talking about at schools how they have behavior plans. And honestly, that's not like a big area in my life because I'm in private practice, and that's not something that we generally address in private practice. But maybe you can explain what that is for people who aren't that familiar with it.
Okay, yeah, no, exactly. So this is for those of you working in the school system are probably familiar with these, because if you're a speech pathologist or just in the field of special education, then you've more than likely at least have come by one. Maybe you've been in a meeting where one of these were created. But essentially what it is over a period of time. So it doesn't really just happen with one instance when a student has a challenging behavior. It usually happens over several times, maybe over a duration. So I'll use an example that comes up every so often with aggression. Aggression seems to be one of those behaviors that leads to a behavior plan. And so when a student is in class and has maybe they bit the student next to them, or they hit another kid at recess or whatever it might be, that will lead into a meeting, not a behavior plan. But when that behavior peeps its little head up again, then it usually calls the team in to do further exploration. And that's when they discuss, okay, we need to look really at creating a behavior plan. And so typically the way those look is the behavior plans will look at, when did this happen? The antecedent, and how can we put things into place? What are some reinforcers? What are some replacement behaviors to address those types of needs? So that's really where they come from. Now, I'm going to shift into one of the thoughts that Jesse and I wanted to talk about, which is what are the outcomes of those things, and what should we consider before we even get to that point, which is this. We tend to look, I shouldn't say we, but typically when a student has a challenging behavior, maybe it is aggression, what's often looked at is how do we stop the kid or the child or the student from hitting somebody else?
Yes, exactly. The top of the iceberg.
That's the top of the iceberg.
Stop the hitting.
Right. So we're looking at whether it's biting, screaming, kicking, punching, saying a bad word. Those are all of the things of how do we get that to stop, right? We're looking at the behavior. We need to look below the surface. We need to put on our scuba diving gear and get down in the cold water to where the large chunk of the iceberg is. And we need to look at that stuff. That's the why. Because when we just look at the behavior of hitting, we're not giving the kid the skill that he was missing. And so what ends up happening is that after the kid returns from suspension, or when the behavior plan has been met after 4 months, we see it pop up a year, 4 years later of the same behavior plan. And it's like, oh my gosh, we're on a hamster wheel, just running in circles. So a lot of this stuff that we talk about, from my knowledge, there's a lot of research and stuff on it, but it's a guy by the name of Dr. Ross Greene. He wrote a book called The Explosive Child. He's got one that I read called Lost at School, which is a fantastic resource. But he talks about looking at what is the unresolved problem, and then what is the lagging skill that we need to teach the kids. So we're looking at the why. What is it that the kid has? So
I love that.
Right?
And it's funny because we will have conversations where Chris will come home and explain something that happened at school, and he will ask me, and what is the lagging skill? And I'll say something like emotional regulation, and he'll say, and then he'll just keep going until we get them all.
It's so fun.
It's such a different way to look at behaviors, though, is, well, what can we help teach the child so that this changes over time? What is the lagging skill?
What is the lagging skill? So examples are a good way for visualizing and providing a scenario. So let's talk about the aggression one. All right. Who's a popular singer of a band, like a rock band?
Oh my gosh. I was gonna say someone in Blink-182.
Oh,
okay. Happy, but I don't know
Tommy.
any of their names.
Tom DeLonge. So we've got little Tommy, right? So Tommy was in elementary school. He got to high school. He was on a behavior support plan or a behavior intervention plan. And so little Tommy had some difficulties in class when he was in math class working on word problems, and got really frustrated, and he ended up hitting the classmate next to him. Physical aggression. But then Tommy did it the following month. And what had initially started off as a 1-day suspension from school led to a 3-day suspension. And then it led to an IEP meeting being called, where they implemented a behavior support plan. And within that behavior support plan, it was agreed upon that we need to address the how. Like, how can we prevent him from hitting? And what that looks like sometimes, actually I should say often, is we need to make sure that these aggressive behaviors don't impact others. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove Tommy from that group, or from that peer, or from that class. But what we're going to do is we're going to give Tommy a replacement behavior. Tommy, when you feel like you're going to hit somebody, you need to walk over to what we talked about, which is next door to the quiet zone, Tommy. And when you get to the quiet zone, you're going to reach in that little bucket of fidgets, and you're going to grab a stress reliever. You're going to squeeze it. You're going to do 10 deep breaths, man. You're going to do that, right? Human brains don't work that way. And Jesse's course dives deep into this. When someone's dysregulated, do you think that they're going to be able to have the critical thinking skills up here in this cortex area to make the decision to go next door, to grab a stress relief ball and squeeze it and take 10 deep breaths? No.
It's that phrase we used to say, which is, between every thought and decision. Do you remember that?
Yeah, for sure. That was that was the guy that wrote the book about the Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl. Yeah. Behind stimulus and response, there's a choice. And within that choice, we have the power to make the outcome of the situation, but not if our brain, and not if we're dysregulated. And this isn't a Tommy issue. This is the way a human brain issue is, right? So typically the way it would look like, okay, Tommy, if you're going to hit somebody, but you didn't, and then you walk next door, we're going to give you a couple stars on your chart. All we're doing on that level, we talked about this in a previous episode, is if he doesn't get those stars, Matt, then guess what? He's punished, right? So what do? We talk about what is the bottom part of the iceberg. What is the skill that Tommy needs? And in this situation, he needs the ability to identify what's going on when he has the difficulty with word problems in math. The issue wasn't the hitting, right? The issue was the word problems in math, because that's where it kept occurring. And so
interestingly enough, one of the major causes of behaviors we see is when kids have feelings of shame, embarrassment, or failure. Those types of feelings actually cause kids to act out. And you probably see that a lot, especially in the high school level.
Right.
Like they sit down, they're embarrassed, they can't do the work. So maybe instead they start like bothering the person in front of them.
And if there's anything I've learned, so I've been in education now for 20 years, there's one thing that you really do learn about high school students, but I should say it's really all kids. And it's this: no kid, when kids wake up, their job for 8 hours is to go to school. Like we have our own jobs. That's what a kid's job is school, right? And they want to be good at it. But the one thing that they really, really want to make sure of is that they're not embarrassed. So when the teacher calls on Tommy, hey, Tommy, you know what? Can you go ahead and give us the answer to number 4? Okay, Tommy's embarrassed because Tommy's already struggled with word problems. Tommy would rather stand up and hit the kid next to him than to look like he doesn't know the answer. That's how it is for everybody, right? Nobody wants to be embarrassed. And if we can understand that, and we can understand that, hey, we don't need to target the behavior. We need to talk about what skill is missing or what skill is lagging and work towards that. Then we can better help the kids for a better future. And that's it.
So what are some of, maybe to give people an idea of what are some of the skills what we might consider lagging skills in that case?
In that case, there's probably a lot of areas, not just one. So the ability to have it, he's lacking the ability to come up with multiple solutions to a problem. He's lacking the ability to self-advocate when he needs help, right? He's lacking the ability to perspective take when he hits somebody with aggression and not thinking about the other kids in the class, possibly, not always. But you see how there's layers of lagging skills that particular station.
Dysregulation, distress, emotional distress.
Shoot, we can even, I mean, not to digress too much, but I mean, we never even know, like a lot of the kids we work with have alexithymia. What if he has a really hard time identifying those feelings or whatnot, or then going and expressing them? If you haven't heard of that word, alexithymia is a word that is long, and I wanted to use it so I sound smart. That's what I did. I did that on the other episode too. No, alexithymia. So it's like, that Alexa on Amazon that you can buy. So Alexa, and then your thigh, it's part of your leg, thigh, and then that musical Mia, Mamma Mia. So alexithymia basically means a difficult time identifying one's emotions and feelings.
Yeah, and that is, we see, at least what current research is that a lot of autistic people have trouble identifying their own emotions and feelings. So the issue with that is that if we don't know how we're feeling, then we don't know what we need in order to get the outcome that we want. Right. So it can all sneak up on us very quickly and trigger very quickly.
And this is important because these are the things that we do a deep dive with. These are the things that are under the surface. These are the things that when we could recognize these types of things, when we could recognize and talk about the lagging skills and then get everybody on board, whether it's the teachers, the counselor, the paraprofessional, the SLPAs, the SLPs, just everybody on the team to work with the student on these lagging skills, we're helping this child form into a fine young adult and a happy adulthood, right? That's kind of how it works.
Okay, not to play devil's advocate, but why do you think that this is so much harder than just making up a behavior plan? Like, what is the reason why more schools haven't adopted these practices? Do you think it's lack of knowledge? Do you think it's lack of resources? Do you think it's because behavior plans work, like in terms of are they effective? Yes, but are they long-term effective? Obviously, we know no.
Well, I think there's layers to this, and not to get too PC on this, I'm going to keep it to, I think that when we work with IEPs, when we work with neurodiversity, when we work with neurodivergent students, what we're learning is what we had thought historically was the way to do it. We've learned a new way. And sometimes, as I talked about in the past, sometimes to make a revolution, the evolution process has to happen. And that's kind of where we're at right now, is really social media and with conversations such as these make our brains reframe how we can approach these, because historically, that's all we've known. You know, there was a time in our life, honestly, not too long ago, just 5 centuries ago, where 98% of people on the planet thought that the world was flat. Not kidding about that. And it was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that 98% of the world actually thought that. All right, we got to reshift our thinking and we got to learn more. And so I think that might be one of them. So we're reframing our thinking.
So this is step one. This is day one.
That's
for some
right.
people.
For some people, it might be one of those things where we sit back and we work on reframing that by shifting our language and the questions that we ask. Rather than saying, how can we get this kid to participate? We can ask, why is this kid not participating? What's underneath that stinking iceberg?
What is the lagging skill?
What is the lagging skill and the underlying thing that's going on?
Yeah. Awesome. So if you stuck around to the end, you get to hear this very exciting announcement I have, partially unrelated to this. I had such an epiphany recently because I had posted about families getting an autism diagnosis and how a lot of kids that I knew would need or get the diagnosis were coming back without it. They would go to their tests and then they would come back without a diagnosis. And I was like, why don't people know how to diagnose these kids? A lot of professionals, I feel like, still don't know the subtle signs of autism and characteristics and things like that. So I just had so many parents chime in about how important the parent input is to that decision, you know, because especially virtually in the pandemic, there are so many families out there doing virtual autism evaluations, which means the professional relies on footage from the parent and questionnaires and conversations with the parent. And that just really was a moment for me where I realized that, which parents have been asking for a long time, for access to our trainings that we do for SLPs. So we decided we are just going to do it. And not this month, it's still June, right?
June.
In July, we are going to be hosting a 4-day sensory communication mini course for parents, and it is going to be free. Completely free. So we're so excited to be able to bring parents the information that we've been able to bring to SLPs so far. And I know that, you know, lots of parents are DMing me, sending me commenting and everything, saying, can we do this? And I keep telling parents, it's in our minds. It's in our minds. So I'm so excited I can officially say it is happening. So I will post a link to the sign up in our video description here, podcast description, so that you guys can sign up because spaces will be limited. So thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope you got some great new information out of today's episode.
And if you enjoyed the episode, we would appreciate it if you can write a review or give us a review. That always helps us out. Stay tuned for next week's episode. But until then, have a legendary rest of your day.
Bye.
Peace.